Hi everybody and welcome to my channel. So in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to do a V-stitch in crochet. So while you can use any type of yarn that you like, in my opinion the V-stitch is worked up really nicely with a thicker yarn. Now this yarn I picked just out of my stash. I believe this is a 7. I don't have the label to this yarn anymore. This was just leftover yarn. But I wanted to pick a thicker yarn for the tutorial purposes so that it was easier to see. You can use any yarn you like, any weight, any color, anything that you like. I personally think that anything a 5, a 6, or a 7 is the best with the V-stitch because it does work up fast, it works up nice. There are spaces in the blanket, but that does get filled in by the thickness of the yarn. So you'll see what I mean as we go along. But it does depend on your preference, obviously. You're the creator, so you get control. So what we'll need for this blanket is you're going to need your yarn, the hook that will match to the size of your yarn. I'm using an 8mm. I don't think you can see that. Let's see if I can focus here. Probably can't see it. I'm using an 8mm yarn. Again, I'm not sure if this is the size that the yarn calls for. I just had this out and I grabbed it, but it'll work for the tutorial. And if you are an absolute beginner, I recommend in general having some stitch markers. Or if you're somebody who, like me, is very visual and tends to have a hard time finding your stitches when you're working back into them or seeing the ends, it can get a little confusing. I recommend to keep a good supply of stitch markers for you. I think I got this set off of Amazon or maybe from Michael's or something, I can't remember. So let's get started. So to start the V-stitch is worked. So the V-stitch is worked in multiples of 3 plus 7. So what that means is you're going to start your foundation row with multiples of 3. And please forgive this tablecloth. This is my crafting tablecloth. And it's a hot mess, but I do a lot of painting and stuff, so that's why this tablecloth looks the way it does. So we're going to do multiples of 3 until you get your project the length or the width that you want it, depending on if you're building the length first or the width. So just for this tutorial, I'm just going to do a quick foundation row. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and let's do one more set. 1, 2, 3. Now, let's say for the purpose of the tutorial, this is the width that I wanted. Obviously, your project is probably going to be a lot bigger, but just for tutorial purposes, let's say this is the width that I wanted. Now, even though this is the width, in order to keep it this size, we're going to follow the stitch multiples of the pattern, which is chains of 3, sets of 3, plus 7. So whenever you see the multiples, you follow what the multiples say, and then if there's a plus and a number, you add that to the end. So you get to your width that you want first, and then you add those additional chains if they're there. Sometimes they won't be there, so don't worry if it's not. So we're going to add 7 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, if you're unsure of everything that I just did, if you are an absolute beginner crocheter, I do have a playlist that I'm going to be building to regularly. It's called Yarniversity. It will show you how to do your slip knot to start your chain. It'll show you how to start your chain. It'll show you how to work into your stitches. It's going to show you how to read your yarn labels. I'm going to be adding to that regularly. So if you're unsure how I got to this point, go check out those videos first just to get the hang of it, and then come back and join along. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So with the bulky yarn, it can be a little difficult to find your chains again. I mean, it could be difficult if you're a beginner anyway. So I'm gonna take my stitch marker. I normally use a threading needle, but I don't have one next to me. And we're gonna count back. Okay, just kidding. I tried sticking these in there, but it's not working. So I'm gonna do a tutorial on this in more detail, but I can tell where my V's are. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is my 4th V, so my 4th stitch from the hook. This loop never counts on your hook. I actually do have a tutorial on this, so if you need help, go check that out. So we're gonna yarn over our hook, insert our hook into that chain, yarn over again, drop a loop, and finish our double crocheting by yarning over, drawing through 2, yarning over, and drawing through 2. Now, what we just did here is these 4 chains that we skipped. This acts as a double crochet. Your pattern will tell you, and I'll link the pattern that I used in the description box. Your pattern will tell you if your turning chain, this is called a turning chain, counts as a stitch or not, and that is very important, and I'll go into more of that as we go into making more projects. But this counts as a double crochet. Generally a chain 3 or 3 skipped chains would count as a double crochet, and a chain 1. And you'll see why that's important. So what we're gonna do next is the pattern says to skip 1 chain. So we're skipping our next V, and we're gonna do the V stitch into the next chain. So let me pull some more yarn here. Okay. So this is the stitch that we worked into. This is the stitch that we're skipping here. And this is the stitch that we're going to do our V stitch in. Now the V stitch is very easy. It is a double crochet, a chain 1, and a double crochet back into that same stitch. We're not going to the next one, we're going into the same stitch. And remember to be mindful of your tension. I probably need a little bit bigger of a hook for this project, but we'll see how this turns out. So what that does is, it's a little hard to see, but it will work out better, is that creates a V. You have your V here, and as we do our next row, you'll see it better. So that creates what's called the V stitch, which is a double crochet, a chain 1, and a double crochet into the same stitch. And now you're going to skip 2 chains, or excuse me, skip 2 stitches. So 1, we skip that one. 2, we're going to skip that one, and we're going to go into our 3rd one. Right here. And if you need to pause me, slow me down, speed me up, go ahead and do so. So we got a double crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet into the same stitch. And I think I'm going to switch to a bigger hook. Let me see if that might help. Be right back. Okay, so I switched to a bigger hook. I have a 10mm hook here, and I think this is much easier to see now. So you see the double crochet, the chains that we skipped, your turning chain, and our double crochet here. This counts as a double crochet in your chain 1. We skipped 2 chains. We did a double crochet, a chain 1, and a double crochet into the same stitch. And that's what you do. This is the pattern. So do this until you get to the end of the row. So 1, 2, let's do it together one more time. So we're going to skip. Yeah, this is much easier. We're going to skip, and we're going to do our V stitch into here, into the 3rd chain. So we skip 2 and do a V stitch into the 3rd, which is a double crochet. This actually might be too big for this yarn, but it's okay. A chain 1 and a double crochet into the same stitch. So you're going to do this all the way down. I don't know how big your project is going to be. I don't know if you're just practicing along with me. And I would normally make this look a little neater, but I don't know if my hook size matches. But you're going to keep doing that all down. I'm going to finish this row and I will show you how to get started on row 1 or row 2. Row 1, row 2. Okay, so you should have 3 chains left at the end of your row. If you have more or less, depending on how much more, you might just need to keep going. If you have less, the V-stitch generally is forgiving, so you can probably get away with it, but you want to have the 3 left. That means that your counts are right, you're skipping the right amount of stitches in between. This is important for a beginner to get the hang of. So I want you to take your time. If you don't have the 3 left, generally I wouldn't panic about it, but as a beginner, I want you to go back and double check to make sure you skipped appropriately, that you have the chain, your foundation chain is multiples of 3 plus the 7. Just go back and double check those things because that's important as you learn how to crochet. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna put in our V-stitch, our last V-stitch. Our chain 1 and our double crochet. This yarn is super bulky. I'm not used to working with a 7, but that's okay. So now when you go into your next row, I learned how to crochet exclusively on YouTube. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Getting over a cold or whatever was plaguing my house for the last 2 weeks. Some creators or crocheters prefer to turn their work and then follow the rest of the instructions. Some prefer to do their chains up, whatever is required to start the next row, and then turn. I personally have done both. I haven't come across a time really where it made a difference one way or the other. Now there may be reasons why patterns are written the way they are. I personally haven't come across where I prefer one way or another. Or not where I prefer, where I think that it would make a difference. So my preference is to turn the work. And then what we're going to do for this pattern is chain 3. But if you find as you're learning to crochet that you prefer to do your chain 3 and then turn, I don't think that would be a problem either. I don't think so. I'm not, an expert, but I don't think that it would be a problem. Okay. So what we're going to do here is this again counts as our first double crochet. So we're going to just finish our V-stitch into the space of the V-stitch below us. So not into the stitches here, but into the space. This is what makes this a very beginner-friendly pattern. It's a very forgiving pattern. Very easy to do. So you'll see you'll have a V there. Okay? And then we're going to chain 1. And we're going to go right into the next V-stitch. Not the stitches on the top, but the space. We're going to go in here. And we're going to yarn over, do our double crochet, our chain 1, and our double crochet to finish the V-stitch. And you will see as you go along. Now I'm using a thick yarn, so be mindful of that. And your sides will straighten out as you go. Don't worry if they're looking if they're leaning a little bit. It's gonna all straighten out as you go. If you are mindful of your tension, if you're using the right hook sizes, if you're adjusting your hook sizes as you need, if your counts are right, if you're taking your time and watching the spacing in between in your foundation, or when you go back to when you do your row 1, if you're skipping the stitches correctly, everything will straighten out. Now if you're beginners, which I assume my audience is going to be beginners if you're watching this, I want you to take your time. This is a very easy pattern to do. This makes for a great blanket. If you're using a bulky yarn, it works up fast. The blanket will be nice and warm. It makes a great gift for anybody. But you don't have to use a bulky yarn. You can use a lighter weight if you prefer. This pattern in particular is very easy. It's very forgiving, and I like it because the only row really that you have to work into the stitches is when you come back on your foundation row and you set up the start of your blanket. And that's where you have to be mindful of where you're putting your stitches. Now I mentioned you were going to need stitch markers and I didn't show you why. So you could do the stitch markers if you needed a visual of where to put it, what stitches to skip and whatnot. I apologize I didn't do that here. But if you need to go back and visualize, where your double crochets are, the stitch markers are just a good spot, a good way to help you keep track of things. You can, I know some people get their multiple set up. They'll put, if you do your 12, right? So a multiple of 3, you put a stitch marker. This isn't big enough for this yarn. You put your stitch marker in where your multiples are done, and then if you have to add that number to the end of your foundation row, that's a good visual. So if you lose track, we had to add 7, right? So if you did your 12 or whatever the number is, you can put your stitch marker after your multiples are complete and then add your number. You can use them for any number of things, and I will be showing these in more tutorials. It didn't occur to me to do it here, and I apologize for that. But the V-stitch pattern is very easy. It's very forgiving. If you don't wind up with those 3 stitches on the end in your first row, it's not really the end of the world. You can make it work. You can wing it, right? But as beginners, if you're brand new to crochet, you're learning, I want you to take your time. I want you to really count and get your counts right. Use your stitch markers if you need to, and have fun with it. I learned exclusively on YouTube how to crochet back in December of 2020 when we were in quarantine because my boyfriend got COVID and we really couldn't go anywhere at all. And I learned, it took me months to really get really good at it. And I still have a lot to learn, but I really enjoy it. I figured out the patterns that are forgiving and the ones that aren't. So, V-stitch is one of my go-tos. So just have fun with it. And if you have any questions, pop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And I hope to see you guys in another video. Now, when you finish your blanket or your project, whatever it is that you're making, I tend to make blankets, so I'm going to call this a blanket. There is a certain way to tie off the project and to weave in your tails and your ends. Now, that's a pretty general process as well. So I actually have a project that I need to tie off and weave in the ends. So I will make a tutorial using that blanket that I've finished and show you how that's done. And show you how to weave in the tails, and I'll put that on my Yarniversity playlist. But just keep going with it. I'm very excited to see what you guys create. You can go over to my Instagram or tag me on Instagram, tag me on YouTube, tag me on Facebook, join my Facebook page. I would love to see you guys there. And everything that I create, everything that I sell, I donate a portion of my profits to animal shelters and rescues. So, this is all for good for me. So I'm very excited to teach you all. I'm excited to learn from you all. And I'll see you in the next video. Show me your projects. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.